No, no, no. Don't sell your house. That is until you watch this video and understand what I'm talking about to see what the consequences are of selling it at the wrong time with the wrong decision. Believe me, I've sold several properties, and if there's one thing I regret in real estate, not as an agent but also as an investor, is that I sold those two properties and I should have hung on to it today. So in this video, I'm going to talk about when you should sell a home or why you should sell a home. It's not always about the price. There's more to selling a house than just the price and profits. If you've been talking to some realtors or watching the news or watching videos like this and thinking, hey, the prices are high, should I sell, make a profit and run? Or should I sell, rent, and then buy when the prices come down and when the interest rate comes down? If you talk to most realtors, they may tell you, hey, yes, this is a good time to sell. You're going to get a lot of money out of it. You paid X amount and you're getting so much more money. Why don't you sell? But is that really what you want? Are you just after the money? As I mentioned earlier, selling a house is more than just about the money. There's a lifestyle. There's a consequences of moving. Kids may be at school. Parents may be close by. Families may be close by. So there's a lot of things to think about. And right now, we don't know what is going to happen in the market. What if the prices go higher? Maybe you bought a house for $800,000 and now it's worth 1.2. And you think, oh my God, $400,000 I make in 5 years. Let me sell and run or go to Montana or Texas where it's much cheaper and move over there. But what if you stay here and the prices go up to 1.8? Chances are statistically prices are still going to go up. Yes, I said that right. Statistically and historically and based on the data. In fact, I just came off a webinar on what's going to happen with the market. And they are predicting for the next 2 or 3 years, prices are still going to go up. Yes, prices are still going to go up despite the rates going higher because there's a shortage and other factors. And I won't get into details yet. So let's talk about, should you sell a house now or should you wait? Now, before I talk about why you should not sell, there may be circumstances where you may have to sell. And those are situations that allow you to sell or force you to sell despite the housing condition, despite the high interest rates or low interest rate, low prices or high prices. One of them could be a divorce. A lot of the families sell their homes or move out of the home because of divorce. Another situation could be where there's a death in the family and the property was in a trust and the siblings get the property, and maybe there are 4 siblings and 2 want to sell and 2 want to cash out. So in that situation, you may be forced to sell the property and not keep it and rent it because maybe the other 2 siblings are saying, look, I want to keep it and rent it out so we have passive income. But the other siblings may say, well, I don't want to go through the hassle of property management and fixing things and taking care of the tenants, being legally liable with tenants, so they want to cash out. So these are situations where if you have to sell, you have to sell despite the current conditions, prices, how long it takes to sell, what the interest rates are. It doesn't matter. The other reason you may want to sell is because maybe there's a relocation. Maybe you got a job promotion or you lost a job and you found another job that you really wanted. Another reason you may want to think about selling is because things are very expensive. I'm in Orange County myself, Anaheim Hills, California, Orange County, and the median home price is $1 million. So even if I bought my house 2-3 years ago, I may be stretching because the prices are so high, gas prices are so high, food is so high. So I may be spending up to 50% of my paycheck on housing, on payments and insurance and taxes. And I'm living paycheck to paycheck, eating sandwiches every day. In that case, I may decide to sell and move on. Or if I'm a new homeowner, I'm thinking, I've lived in California for so long, in Orange County or in Anaheim Hills. An average home costs $1 million. I have a big family, 4 kids. My parents are with me. So if I buy a big house, it's going to cost me $2 million. Heck, I can't afford that. So in this case, I may have to move to other states where it's much cheaper. Oklahoma is much cheaper. Montana is much cheaper. At a $2 million house today here in Orange County, it may cost a big size home maybe in Texas for $600,000, $700,000. So it may be worth for you to move in that situation. So there are circumstances where you have to move, and there are circumstances where you just move on. One thing is for sure, when there are so many fluctuations in the market with interest rate, with inflation, with unemployment, with the global wars, the local politics, anything can happen. But the last thing we want to do is chase the market or time the market. Nobody has been able to do that. Nobody could predict the 2.5% interest rate. Nobody could predict the 2008 recession. Nobody could predict the 8% inflation rate over the last 20 years. So we don't know what's going to happen. So one thing you don't want to do is time the market, because you never can do that. Not even the experts can do that. But if you have to sell, you have to sell. And if you can wait and sell. So here's some decisions I'm going to talk about where you may want to make, why it may not be a good time for you to sell right now, and wait it out a little bit based on your situation. And the first thing that they want to talk about is the wrong reason to sell, whether it's your own home or a rental property. A lot of people own rental properties. And I'll give you my own example. Back in 2000, I bought a fixer. I fixed it up and flipped it. I bought it for $200,000 roughly. I spent about $30,000 if I can remember right. And then I know I sold it for about $290,000, and I made about $40,000 in about 6 months' time. I was very happy I made that much money because I thought the market was going up, because the market was going up at that time. I made the $40,000. But that has been my biggest regret. I'll tell you why. That home, I passed that home many times and I regret it every time I see it. Those homes in the neighborhood today are selling for $800,000. Yes, the $300,000 homes in 2000 are selling for $800,000 currently. So I'm talking from personal experience. So I hope I can help you make a great decision today. So let's talk about some other decision. As I mentioned, just because the price is not a good reason for you to sell. By the way, I'm Mike Patel with First Team Real Estate right here in Anaheim Hills, California. So if you have any questions or comments, please make them below, and also subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. So let's talk further and decide, hey, I bought my house for, let's say, $800,000 and now it's worth $1.2 million. Let me sell it. I have a $400,000 profit and I can buy something bigger. Yes, you can. But have you considered the consequences that it may cost you more? Well, let's look at the scenario. Let's say you bought a house 5 years ago, 6 years ago in Orange County for $800,000. They've gone up 20, 30, 40%. So let's say that the house is worth $1.2 million. And at that time, you had a interest rate of 4%. So yes, by selling it at 1.2, you're going to have a profit of $400,000. Plus, you're going to get back the down payment and all the principal you paid. So you may end up buying, hey, I made so much money, I'm going to buy a $1.8 million house with a pool and a view and entertainment yard and all that, which is great. But here's the disadvantage. Right now, if you sell, you are giving up your 4% interest rate, which you bought for, and you're going to pay almost 8%. Rates were 8% last week. So just there's a big jump in your payment. That's a big jump. Not only that, your property tax, which you were paying on a basis of $800,000, now you're paying property tax because you bought a $1.6 or $1.8 million home. Your property tax just doubled. So yes, you got a bigger house. You got a bigger yard. You got a pool. You got a view. You're going to call your friends over, have some cigars or wine or whatever. But your property tax doubled. Your mortgage payments doubled. And you are getting tighter and tighter. Unless you really wanted that lifestyle and you thought about increasing property tax, increasing payments, you may be making a mistake. So think thoroughly before you make that big jump. The other thing you have to consider when you buy a house, and let's go back to that example I gave you. Let's say I bought that $800,000 home 10 years ago as an example. And 10 years later, which is today, I'm going to sell it. So I paid 10 years worth of mortgage. And as you know, in the first 30 years, assuming you have a 30-year mortgage, the first 10 years, you pay a lot of mortgage in your payments. Now you're selling that house and you're buying the bigger house, which is fine. Did you know that you're starting your 30-year clock again? That means you took another 30-year loan. You've already paid 10 years. Now you're, let's say, 40 years old and you're starting a 30-year clock on a mortgage payment. So that means by the time you're 70, you will be paying off your house. So when you buy another house, you start another clock with high interest payments the first 10 years. So that's another disadvantage of buying another house. So a lot of people keep their first house and stay in there, or buy another house, keep the other house, and then rent it out and buy another one to have some tax advantages and have passive income once they retire. And it doesn't matter how long that clock is because you have additional money coming in from your rental income. So that's another thing to consider. How long are you going to keep paying those mortgage payments? Because every time you refinance, every time you buy a new home, you start that 30-year clock. By the way, I want to take a quick moment and remind you to subscribe, and please make any comments or ask any questions. I'll be glad to respond to your questions. Another thing you have to consider when you think you're going to sell high because you're going to get a lot of profit, which is great. But did you know that when you sell a home and if you have a capital gains, you're going to end up paying taxes on the gain. So if you're a single person in California, at least, you don't have to pay any capital gains tax up to $250,000. If you're married, filing jointly, by the way, talk to your accountant about this. I'm just giving it a mention. If you're married, then you have up to $500,000 in capital gains. So any gain after that, you're going to pay taxes on it. And talking about expenses, here's another expense, which is a huge expense that consumers or buyers or sellers don't think about. So let's talk about that. As we know, when you sell a house, there are expenses. Just like when you buy a house, you have some expenses. So let's talk about those expenses that a lot of people don't consider. So going back to that example, let's say somebody bought a house for $800,000 and they're excited because the market is so high and they're selling it for 1.2. Great, they made $400,000 profit. Excellent. But here's expenses that they may not want to consider. When you sell a house, and if we take a 6% commission as an average and add some closing cost and title fees and all that, if you sell that for about 1.2, it's going to cost you roughly, and I'm just taking an example, it's going to cost you anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 just to sell the homes because of all those expenses. Now you're going to sell that home and buy another house. So let's say you had bought the house for $800,000. Now you're selling it for 1.2. It's going to cost you around $60,000 to $80,000. But you're moving up. Life is good. Business is good. So you moved up and bought a 1.5 house. So to buy that house is going to cost you roughly $30,000 in closing costs, property tax, insurance, taxes, prepaid insurance, etc. So when you sold that house, it cost you about $80,000. And when you bought the house, it cost you around $30,000. So now you're looking at $110,000 in expenses. Now you also paid capital gains tax. So you probably lost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So that's another loss. So all these add up, not counting the moving cost, the inconvenient cost. Because you bought a bigger home, you have to buy more furniture. You had some old furniture sitting in your house for 10, 15 years. You got rid of that. You bought new appliances. So all of a sudden, you have so much expenses that you never thought about. New appliances, moving costs, closing cost on selling a home, closing cost on buying a home. It could get nasty, and it does. In this case, we are looking close to $150,000 or more because we don't know what the taxes are. So these costs add up. It's not all rosy and say, oh, I'm going to make $400,000 and buy something else. You're really not making $400,000 profit in the example that I was giving you earlier. In this market, if you're thinking about selling, this is one of the biggest things you have to consider. And I'll give an example of what happened. And what is that to consider? You have to consider that there's a shortage of homes. One of the reasons that sellers are getting high price is because there's a shortage of inventory. Rents are too high, so people want to buy a house. So going back to the example of, let's say, the $800,000 house, selling it for 1.2. So now you have $400,000 less expenses and you're going to buy something for 1.5. The dilemma is because of the shortage of inventory. The current inventory, according to the National Association of Realtors, is 3.2. Current market, which is right now November 2023. Back in the recession, the inventory was 10 months supply. 3.3 months supply means if no homes come on the market, all the homes on the market will sell within 3 months. Of course, that's a national number. Your local numbers may vary. It may sell in 2 weeks. It may sell in 4 months. But the thing is, there's a shortage of inventory. So if I sell my house for 1.2, I'm going to have a hard time finding something for 1.5, 1.6, let alone I'm finding it in 2 months or when I close escrow. I have 3 buyers right now, one in the 1 million range, 2 million range, and a $3 million range. I have not shown them a house in 2 months because there's nothing to show. There's no inventory. And when a good property comes in a good location at a good price, they have multiple offers. So if you are thinking about selling, making profit, consider that you will have limited amount of home choices to make and you may have to pay over list price. So be prepared for that. It may be a good idea, it may not be a good idea, but that's something you may want to consider. So one of the things I want to caution you is that if you are thinking about selling, remember that you're going to get a top price. So remember, if you want a top price, buyers are very savvy today with websites like Zillow and Realtor.com and multiple listing service which they have access to through their agents. Buyers are very savvy today. So if you're asking top price for the home, they want the house in top condition. They want everything to be working. They want a great location. So you may want to be sure that your house is staged, everything's working okay, or your house should reflect the price if it's not in good condition. Because just like you are making a profit, the buyers want the lowest amount and the sellers want the highest amount. So we as agents have to fight in between. If you're a seller, we're trying to get you as much price as possible. And as a buyer's agent, we're trying to get you as less as possible. So there's a catch-22. So just because the market is hot doesn't mean you'll get 1.4. If the comps or comparatives are selling for 1.4 in your neighborhood, make sure your house is worth 1.4. You have great curb appeal, your landscaping is done, your roof is not leaking, your appliances are working, everything is tip-top, because a savvy buyer will pay you the price, but they will expect your house to be in that condition. So keep that in mind. And the other thing I want to talk about is when a seller or a buyer buys a house, it is one of the biggest assets that they have. You have a lot of equity in there, you have appreciation there, you have tax write-off. But also remember that the buyer's biggest expense today, just like seller's biggest asset is their home, the seller's or the buyer's biggest asset is their home also. So you don't want that house to be a burden. You don't want 50% of your paycheck going to your house payments when it comes to principal, interest, tax, and insurance, your utilities, your cable bills, your maintenance, your water, your HOA, you name it, earthquake policy. If you're stretching yourself to get a great house because you made some profits, that's the wrong decision to go by, because you don't want to be a slave to your property. You don't want to be a slave to your house. You want to enjoy the house. Your payment should be enough that you are comfortable with, so you can go out and have dinner with your friends and family, take your kids out to movies, go out on a vacation. But if you're stuck with being a slave to your house, to the payments, it's not a good call. By the way, one of the things I talk about in a previous video I did is how to pay off your mortgage sooner, maybe in 20 years instead of 30 years, and enjoy that house. So please watch that video. Here's the link on it.